Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is September 22nd, 2017. Greetings from Ocean Park, Maine, where I'm going to take a break from opening with the sound of the surf. Thank you, Norm Gregory, for your feedback via Twitter on this point. I love the sound of the surf, but I think it can get old, and it's good to change things up. Last week, I attended Agents of Change, a social media conference in nearby Portland. After the lunch break, I recorded this week's interview with a remarkable young woman who was one of the presenters. Her name is Jillian Vorce, and her topic at Agents of Change was how to use digital marketing to build relationship and trust.
And when you build relationships for the sake of relationships, amazing things can happen. Your soil becomes so rich that what can grow and harvest is well beyond what you ever could have planted if you had known.
First up in news this week is a real live device announcement, not a rumor, from Amazon. That was Tuesday, September 19th. The all-new Fire HD 10 became available for pre-order that day, with delivery beginning October 11th. With special offers, the 32-gigabyte version of the HD 10 costs $150, and it is available in black, blue, and red. I was sad there isn't a canary yellow. That was my favorite color for the Fire HD 8 introduced last year and updated to the 7th generation in June of this year. So I ordered a 32-gigabyte Fire HD 10 in blue with a matching blue cover. The 64-gigabyte model of the new Fire HD 10 sells for $190 with special offers and $205 if you take the special offers or the ads off. Otherwise, they appear on your screen when you wake it up from sleep mode. Whichever storage size you choose for the HD10, you can expand it with up to 256 gigabytes of storage using the tablet's micro SD slot. The 64-gigabyte Fire HD 10, whose screen measures 10.1 inches on the diagonal, costs less than half the price of a comparable 64-gigabyte iPad Pro. Now, the Pro does have a larger screen, 10.5 inches on the diagonal, and the iPad Pro's resolution is 264 pixels per inch compared with 224 pixels per inch for the HD 10. I'm not sure that I would be able to discern that difference, but maybe, I don't know. The iPad is 3.7 millimeters thinner than the Fire, and it weighs 31 grams less than the HD 10. The value proposition of the Fire HD 10 is pretty amazing when you compare the no special offers version with the iPad, which costs $444 more than the HD 10. That's $649 compared with $205. Now, I know the operating systems are very different, and there'll be a lot of reasons to go with the Apple tablet, partly the Apple-ish wow factor in the design, but still, $444, that's a lot to spend on wow, even for me. The most notable advance in Amazon's new tablet is hands-free Alexa capability. In other words, you can leave the Fire HD 10 in sort of a sleep mode and wake up the Alexa genie with the usual wake word. This feature is listed as available soon via software update, so I probably won't be able to test it when mine arrives in 19 days. I'm sure the microphone in the HD 10 will not be able to pick up commands as far away as the Echo Show can. The Show, which costs $230, has 8 microphones and beam-forming technology and much better speakers than the HD 10 will have. But I think, just thinking this through, that the two devices will probably work very similarly because they will both have screens to supplement the information that Alexa gives us by voice. If I'm correct about that, the $150 HD 10 might serve as a sort of Echo Show Lite with the added advantage of portability and the ability to run it on battery power. The Show always needs to be plugged into a power outlet. Are you going to order a Fire HD 10? I'm not sure that I would if I weren't doing this show. That's one reason I love the show, is it gives me an excuse to try all these devices. But I do love my Fire HD 8. It's plenty big for watching the Vietnam War documentary with the PBS app, or reading comic books or magazines and books, of course. Still, the larger screen will no doubt be gorgeous, and we have a use case which is going to be helpful because because until Darlene and I retrieve our furniture from storage after the remodeling project in Cambridge is finished, we don't have a television down there. So when we're down in Cambridge, we've been watching shows on my Fire HD 8 or on a Fire 7, which is even smaller. When the HD 10 arrives, we're going to have a little bit more screen to enjoy. We'll place it on a hassock very close to the 2 chairs that we have set up for the living room. It's going to be nice when our actual TV shows up when we get stuff out of storage. If you do buy a Fire HD 10, I hope you'll consider starting your purchase by clicking on the Amazon ad at the upper right of my show notes page at thekindlechronicles.com. If you get to Amazon.com that way, most things you purchase within 24 hours will generate Amazon Associates commissions that help support my show. Much appreciated. Next in news, I am very intrigued at reports that Amazon is working on something like Google Glass. That was the glasses with a little screen that I nerded out with in the early days, and then it ended up on eBay. But it was a very intriguing bit of technology. Amazon's version apparently is not going to have that distracting little screen, but it will have Alexa, and talking to you in her smooth voice. Her voice will be coming through the bones of your head, apparently, out of range of anyone listening and not requiring any earbuds. Will she have cellular range, though? I wonder. That would be something. I have to admit that would be kind of cool to think of Alexa with me all the time, wearing glasses that I assume I could fit with my prescription lenses. The Financial Times story that broke this news is behind a paywall, but I'll have a link in the show notes to the highlights as reported by TechCrunch 2 days ago. No indication of what these might cost or when they might be showing up. I will have links in the show notes to some other stories that might be of interest to you. One, referred to me by listener Hassan Diwan, argues that Alexa may fail to win the battle for home-based artificial intelligence because of Amazon's comparatively slow start in making Alexa fully available in international markets compared with Google and Siri's rollout. The author of the piece, Phil Hawthorne, titled his blog post, "Why Alexa is on Track to Lose the Smart Home Assistant War." It was published on September 16th at philhawthorne.com. Hawthorne lives in Australia, where it is a challenge apparently to have Alexa give you the local weather without specifying your city, because you can't set your Amazon account up with an official address in Australia yet. It sounds like kind of a small thing, but I do enjoy asking Alexa what the weather is here, and without saying the city, she tells me. Alexa, what's the weather?
In Old Orchard Beach, it's 62 degrees with mostly cloudy skies. Tonight, you can look for just
Alexa,
a few
stop.
clouds in the sky with a low of 58 degrees.
There's a little bit of work that goes into that, because when I move from here to other places with my device, if I take this Echo Show down to Cambridge, I'd have to go into the Alexa app on my iPhone and change the address for this particular device. But once you get that set up, you don't have to say the city. And because my Amazon account is registered in the U.S., it's apparently easier than if I were in Australia. You know, as I think about this, I wonder, why couldn't Mr. Hawthorne do the same thing to get his Echo devices knowing which city to give in the weather just by changing the location of the device in the app? I assume there's an app on a smartphone that's controlling the device. So it may be that I'm missing something, but his basic point is that because there are limitations in which addresses you can set up as your official Amazon address, it has some hurdles that we don't experience here in the U.S. in using Alexa. This is a thought-provoking blog piece because most of the Alexa coverage here in the U.S. is so bullish. In fact, GeekWire this week reported that Amazon has an estimated 76% of the share of the home smart speakers market. That estimate came from a survey of 300 U.S. owners of Echo or Google devices as of June 30th, done by Consumer Intelligence Research Partners, CIRP. The same survey put Google Home's share of the market at 24%. The head of CIRP attributed Amazon's commanding market position to the company's 2-year head start in launching Alexa and Echo devices. Finally, in news, there was an item I came across this week which helps us understand how Amazon manages to come up with the occasional breakthrough innovation like the Kindle or Alexa. Justin Fox, writing at Bloomberg, this is back on June 16th, reported that Amazon late last year passed Volkswagen to become the world's biggest corporate spender on research and development. The piece includes an impressive graph tracking data from 2007 to the first quarter of this year. The Amazon R&D line crosses up past that of VW in the third quarter of last year and just keeps on increasing. Amazon spent $17.4 billion on R&D over the 12 months ending in March. Now, that number is reported in Amazon's filings as technology and content, and that appears to be R&D by any other name. Another chart in the story shows Amazon on top in R&D spending, followed by VW, Alphabet, Intel, Samsung, Microsoft, Roche, Huawei, and in ninth place, Apple. I have a tech tip sent to me by listener Steve Lehos. Hi, Len. If you hold down the Amazon app with enough pressure, a menu option comes up, and one of them is Scan It. So you can directly scan something without having to go into the app like you mentioned in your podcast. Thanks, Steve. I tried that. That is a brilliant suggestion. I think that's something that the head of Amazon Books, Jennifer Cass, didn't know about either. But on my iPhone, when I press that Amazon app, it does come up with sort of a sub-menu when you do the force press on the iPhone, and then it goes straight to the scan button. So if I had known that, I wouldn't have had to do those 4 taps to scan books and find out what they were selling for at the Amazon Books store in Linfield. There's an item, I think I'll put this in the show notes for you. I had trouble making it work because my library card numbers have lapsed in Cambridge, but there's a way using the Google app to find a book, and if you go to Get Book tab, it will bring you automatically to a place where you can enter your information for your public library and then download the book to your device. Pretty nice. Now, of course, you can get Kindle books from your library as well, and that's a pretty easy process, but it was, I think, a good thing for Google to add streamlined access to libraries if you're looking for books in just a regular Google search mechanism. The interview this week resulted from a bit of an experiment that I did before the conference I attended a week ago today in Portland. That's Agents of Change. It's an excellent gathering of social media luminaries each year, organized by Rich Brooks, who runs an agency in Portland. I thought I would like to interview one of the presenters in person at the conference, but instead of using bios and resume information to make a kind of a rational choice, I decided to make my selection relying more on the right side of my brain. I knew that every speaker would have YouTube videos available because these are people who know how to reach out to audiences on the internet. So I watched a number of impressive clips by speakers who would have brought us good, solid information and opinions about social media, but none of them rang the bell of my intuitive curator, none, that is, until I came across an 11-minute TEDx talk from 4 years ago that began with this.
So my name is Jillian Vorce, and can we start off tonight with a little bit of woo-hoo? Thank you so much. I have to say that because right now in this moment, there's a convergence of emotions that I'm feeling. On the one hand, I am profoundly grateful and so honored for the opportunity to be here tonight. And also, it's highly emotional for me as well, because what I'm going to share with you tonight is personal, and I'm very passionate about it. And I'm going to do my best to convey what I know, what I've experienced in my life, and put it to you in a way that I can.
So that was Jillian Vorce, who looked familiar to me as I was watching the YouTube clips, but it wasn't until after I had pinged her on Twitter and her website with an interview request that I realized that we had met in person at Steve Garfield's Boston Media Makers, a monthly gathering in the Jamaica Plains section of Boston. Jillian pretty quickly graciously accepted my invitation, and that gave me a day to read at least half of an impressive book that she published last year with a Boston College adjunct professor, Phil Fragasso. That book is titled 2020 Mind Sight, Refocus, Reignite, and Reinvent Your Life from the Inside Out. I attended Jillian's Agents of Change presentation on building relationships with digital marketing, and after lunch we sat down in an empty classroom at the University of Southern Maine where the conference was held. Now, in most of the more than 400 interviews that I've done for this podcast, I'd say I have a pretty good idea what my guest and I are going to talk about, what I'm going to learn. And for this one, I had a more vague map. It was based pretty much on a hunch that this would be an interesting woman to get to know. I will summarize the early part of our conversation in which Jillian told me her interest in business caught fire when she was in her early 20s, when she heard Oprah Winfrey interview Robert Kiyosaki, author of the best-selling book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And later, Jillian received support and guidance from Fragasso at BC, and his successful books include Marketing for Rainmakers, 52 Rules of Engagement to Attract and Retain Customers for Life. She ended up doing guest lectures for his business classes at Boston College, where she was struck by students who knew very little about what their core values, beliefs, and aspirations were. "I'm here at Boston College because my parents want me to be here," one told her. That led her to a passion for helping people and organizations find a quality that she calls irrepressibility, by which she means an infectious aggregation of discipline, passion, focus, and boundless enthusiasm. It's really a way to talk about a life force that I found was evident in this earnest woman, now in her early 40s. What are her current values, beliefs, and aspirations? I asked that about a third of the way through our conversation, and here's what she had to say.
I love to stretch people's minds to see things in a new way.
Yeah.
So with being a young woman, I learned quickly that I had to be better, sharper, faster, and prepared 10 times over. And I quickly learned about how I should dress and how to present myself. So I was always dressed very conservatively and always in a suit with my hair pulled back always. Like some detailed things that people want to hear, not want to hear. It's always tricky to go to this point, but I'm very open book. So I learned that if I wear my hair down, the gentleman would treat me a certain way as opposed to wear my hair back. I learned if I'm wearing heels, if I'm not, I learned... And so that was where I got a lot of, in the earlier years there, I had more confidence when I was dressed in a suit, and I felt like at least I look like I kind of belong at the table, even though they're my grandfather's age or what have you. Uh-huh. But eventually I learned body language and posture. Yeah. And so that's what I teach now. I understand now what the clothes that you wear and whatnot matters, but that's why the millionaire next door, the people that are underdressed are often the ones that you want to talk to, and the ones that are the most successful that don't need to flaunt it. So that's one piece. But beyond that, I learned, and it's also, I think, still very practical, one of the lessons I learned, which is I obviously knew at that time I was not the smartest person. I had very few resources to provide. I didn't have a database. I didn't have much of anything. But what I could do was be present, listen, ask questions, and connect dots or suggest resources. And I began to do that and just pay attention.
And you could see that worked. That brought you into these groups from, it didn't matter where.
Incredibly well. And they began to trust me. And I started to put people together and add more value and provide context and remind them of things, give a boost of energy. I started to push back on things, challenge things, and help to reignite organizations, many of which, were starting to get to that lull period and looking for, rejuvenation. And so I had earned enough equity in those relationships that when the time was there, I could. So I could, I had a lot more space and a lot more freedom and liberties. But it was because I didn't jump in immediately and try to tell them how great I was and what I could do and tell them any of those things. I earned respect, I think.
It's interesting because in some ways it seems like a conflict that you were dressing and presenting yourself in kind of a role that would increase your effectiveness. But the message of the book and obviously sort of the arc of your life is toward authenticity and presenting yourself.
Sure.
I mean, if you're on your own, you're not wearing a suit and having your hair back.
Sure, it's a great question.
Is there a desire to, as you move forward in life, that you're not locked into roles, even though it was sort of wise to do so when you were younger?
Sure, so I appreciate that. So you'll see now, I still like a suit jacket, but I prefer to wear jeans. They're a bit more comfortable.
Yeah, there's a hybrid going on.
Yeah, for sure. It's much more comfortable. And so the way I would answer that is, I was, over the years, I've continued to get to know myself more and be confident and comfortable with who I am. And in certain environments, there's certain protocols and things that are called for or uncalled for. So abiding by those, it matters, and that's, you don't want to just, upset the apple cart too much, because you want to have some apples left over, at least, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is, another reference, that movie Hitch. It's a, Will Smith movie, and he talks about, helping people see what they need to see so that they can do the things that are going to help them. Huh. So I needed to dress a certain way to allow the other, the guys really at the table to feel like, to see professionalism and to see me as such.
You're kind of removing obstacles that might keep them from seeing what you have to bring.
Presentation, correct. And so presenting in that way, it sent a message to them, nonverbal communication, it sent a message. So I was typically dressed, to the nines, as they say.
Yeah.
On point always, and I was very clear about my posture, and I'm strapping 5'3", so I'd make sure I'd stand up and have my heels on, and shoulders back and shake hands firmly, and we teach people how to treat us. That's one of my favorite quotes, and a lot of it goes back to those days. That really is when I cut my teeth in business and learning how to present, how to connect with people, how to listen and provide value, and so that's what I still do.
You mentioned in the TED Talk that your sexuality comes into play because people don't know automatically that you're gay.
Sure.
And
unless they have the tag on. Some days I wear that tag, I am gay, but some days I don't. So.
You're kidding, right?
No, I'm just playing. Yeah.
I have no idea. Maybe that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how has that played out? Did you come out in those kinds of situations fairly young, or when do you kind of bring that to the table as part of who you are when you're getting work done? When do you don't? What have you learned about that?
So what's interesting about that is, in my experience, in conversations, many conversations I've had over the years, typically people will say, well, it's none of their business. And, I would say, not to generalize, I don't love generalizing, and I don't speak for all gay people, but, a lot of straight folk, as I call them, my straight friend. It's okay to be straight, by the way.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I love feeding back the lines that I've been told. But no, in all seriousness, they'll say, well, nobody asks, and it's kind of like you don't realize how often you blink because it's just what you do. So people who are straight don't realize how often personal life comes up in business conversations because it's the quote-unquote norm, right? So people will just inadvertently mention, oh, my wife does this, or oh, my husband works there, and not think anything of it. So because it's not, emotionally charged, it doesn't register to them. So when you're outside of that conventional bubble, you have to think about these things. And so it was, believe me, a challenge at, 22 years old, 23 years old, to be younger, to be female, and oh, by the way, openly gay.
Right.
So I think the best example is, walking in, I was invited to join Rotary. So you can imagine that's known, worldwide as being the old boys club, the Brown Sox. It's old men. It's old, wealthy men. That's what it is.
Mainly white.
Predominantly white, for sure. And then there's me. So I arrive at the scene, and the gentleman who invited me to this particular club happened to be the oldest member of the club.
Was this in Boston?
It was, correct. And so he invited me, and I, no surprise, I've become accustomed to, for sure now, but the story, one of the themes of my career, is to not blend in so well, right? So I walked into a Rotary meeting, and no surprise, I think there were 3 or 4 women, all north of 60, and that's probably being generous. I'm saying probably 70 plus.
Right.
And then all the guys. And so, of course, I went over and sat at one of the tables and found out later it was the head table with the CEO of the bank and, the whole bit. And I knew that it was only a matter of time for that conversation to come up because people ask, oh, they don't mean anything by it. Oh, nice. young, attractive woman like you must, these conversations, which is exactly what happened when I was in Thailand. Who gave me the content for my TED Talk. So to try to put a bow on this, what I did specifically with Rotary is I decided I was going to be a guest until I knew whether or not this organization, not that they could handle it, but that they were able to see me as me, and not as that. I didn't want my title, the tag, to precede who I was, right? So there was enough time for them to get to know me, and it worked out well because the year later I got married to a woman, and so for many of them, it was striking. They had never, known somebody and whatnot, but it became a really incredible opportunity for the community, for that organization. We began to look at the charities and foundations that we were supporting and whether or not they were open and accepting or not. I mean, so a lot of things happened, and it brought me back to the same experience I had at 20, 21, 22 years old. People are not their titles. Yeah. People are people, and it was, I think nobody realized. I mean, I quickly realized how many of them were struggling with dealing with the sexuality issue of their own, or their kids, or their sister-in-law, or what have you. And by simply, for me, not avoiding it, not hiding it, not being defensive about it, just being matter-of-fact about it, not in your face, nothing, just matter-of-fact about it.
Well, did you have times when there was pushback? Maybe people didn't mean to be hurtful, but it was just clear what a lift this was going to be for the people in that club, but you kept going, or was it just kind of a surprisingly easy absorption of you as a person, whether you were gay or not?
Sure. So I think yes and both. I think, as I'd mentioned earlier, one of my favorite quotes is, "We teach people how to treat us." So when I talk about it, I use humor a lot to just kind of lighten it a little bit, but I'm not asking if it's okay. I don't think about it. It's not really an important part of who I am. I have curly hair as well, but is that okay? I don't think about it, so it's not a big deal. But I realize for other people it is. And so it's an opportunity. I think one of the best things that happened in that community, and that continues to live on today because they continue to reach out to me and whatnot, and it's led to a host of other opportunities.
This is Rotary?
Correct. I could never have, I ended up being assistant governor and did a bunch of things with Rotary. But in any case, I think one of those moments that you might be alluding to is when the guys, it became they were my peers, but not really my peers. They were like my dad's age or my grandfather's age kind of thing. But I built good relationships with them, so they respected me, and we would talk about business. They would look me in the eye. And when we would do events or be out in the public, and they would see how other men would respond and whatnot, and the inappropriate comments, it began to make it real for them that I could be their wife, their daughter, their granddaughter. In beginning to, it was a mirror for them, because in that organization and in many organizations, there's a certain type of conversation that happens when it's amongst friends or amongst men. So they don't mean to, and intention matters a lot. And so that's what I realized, and I would explain to the guys, that was inappropriate, but that's the tip of the iceberg. And so you learn, I would say, as a woman or a gay woman, or at least I have, how to discern from somebody's intention. Is it to hurt? Is it to, just understand? And, the last thing I'll say about that is, to me, and it's also one of the things I still talk about to this day, is one of the best ways to mitigate ignorance is through conversation. And most people just have not yet had the opportunity to ask some of those questions that might sound silly. I mean, I was married to a woman that looked like she could be in the front of a Victoria's Secret magazine. And so the guys could not understand how that could be possible. And they would ask questions like,
But they trusted you enough to risk a conversation where they might say something inadvertently stupid or hurtful.
Correct.
And that's how they would have a chance to learn.
And so they got to see me as a person and realize what was going on, that I was no different than. And so it challenged a lot of their ideas about what does a gay woman look like, and so which one of you is the husband, and all those silly questions, but a lot of people have those questions. So like I said, I don't fancy myself a martyr. I don't speak for like the whole gay community, and I don't know everybody.
Story,
but it's just part of it, and it's also another example of how I had every opportunity to hide, to deflect, to have a chip on my shoulder. But when you see that most people mean well, or just they respond when you're authentic, and so that's been the story of my career.
I saw a reference to a novel, another book. What, if you could have your dream next creation in writing, what would it be?
So a couple things. First, one of my favorite books ever is called The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. And so several years ago, I had that thing that happens when one person tells you something, you're like, okay, and a second person, a third person, you're like, all right, fine, after a while. So I had so many people tell me, Jillian, you should read The Glass Castle. So I finally picked up the book.
What's it about? I don't know it.
It's a story, it's a true story of this woman and her upbringing in an extremely unorthodox and very conventional way. And she tells the story about how she grew up and how it influenced her. It's almost unbelievable for some people, and striking and extremely raw. I read the book and was glued to it in a hot minute. So of course, as serendipity happens, and the more it happens, the more open to it you are, the more it happens, and so forth. So she ended up coming to an area near me, so I went and met her. October 27th, 2009. I have a thing with dates. So anyhow, met her there, and we chatted quite a bit. I spent 20 minutes to a half an hour with her at the end of her talk and presenting her book, and had a wonderful conversation. And she told me at that point, she said, I told her a little bit about my story, and she had encouraged me to tell the truth and to write, and she talked about writing the foreword for my book as well.
Wow.
So lo and behold, since then, her book has become a movie. I still think it's still out in theaters now. Woody Harrelson and Brie Larson are in it. Some A-list celebrities playing in The Glass Castle on the big screen. It's a major deal for her. So I just saw her this past October. She was at a major conference in Boston, actually. And so I went there to go see her, and we reconnected, and she remembered me. And so we talked for a while and laughed. And so the reason I go off on that tangent is because that has been the book that I have needed to write for more than 20 years, because I've lived a very unorthodox life as well.
So you say a book like the one she wrote?
Correct, my version of it.
Your version.
So it would be a true life novel.
Yeah.
So that's me, that's my book, and so she has encouraged me, and many people have been waiting to hear those. That will come. It's just timing. So
that's a scary book especially when
book.
You're not hiding behind this is fiction. This isn't me. Your intention is
correct. So that's what she talked about, calling it a true life novel.
I see.
So it's a novel, but based on true life, kind of like it's.
Do you have a title for it in your mind yet?
Not yet. So the second book is more business oriented, and I've had a number of people ask me to write about different things, and as they find out, stories of things that have happened, to write a book on, I feel like there's so many books about networking, but I'm looking to explore relationships and networking as they exist between personal and business life, right? And so this idea that like my network, I've built it to somewhere around 10,000 people, but it's literally about one handshake at a time. So people have asked me to write a book, one handshake at a time. And when you build relationships for the sake of relationships, amazing things can happen. Your soil becomes so rich that what can grow and harvest is well beyond what you ever could have planted if you had known. So that idea and the opportunities that happen, so a different take on relationships. So not necessarily a business book, but combining the two, because I've lived in both worlds all these years. I never had a business personality and a personal person. It's like, this is me, this is who I am all the time. And so how to build relationships from that standpoint.
Two very different books you've got. You imagine one of them coming out before the other?
Probably the more business-oriented book will come out first. I'm soon to be launching an entirely new standalone product and service offering called the Handshakers Academy. And so a lot of people, I've coached a lot of executives and worked with a lot of organizations and people about how to optimize their relationships and their networks and how to build sustainable communities. I will probably go in that direction and share some of it. I have...
And that'll relate to the topic of the book pretty nicely.
Yeah, exactly. So those two things will connect the dots because, I never thought of a lot of the things I was doing as, teachable things. It's just what I did. It's just instincts and trial and error and meeting thousands of people that I've learned things. And so now I realize more and more that things I've learned can actually help other people and they can apply them to their lives as well. So probably go in that direction.
I have been speaking with Jillian Vorce, founder of the Jillian Group and author of 2020 Mind Sight, Refocus, Reignite, and Reinvent Your Life from the Inside Out. Thanks very much, Jillian.
It's so great to talk with you, Len. I really appreciate it.
In content this week, I want to mention the Vietnam War documentary by Ken Burns. It's on PBS, and I found a PBS app at the Amazon store that I was able to download to my Fire tablet, and it enables me to watch the episodes so far for free, and they look fine on the 8-inch screen, and it's been a good way to follow along. I noticed that when I was watching on my Fire TV and I pulled up the PBS app through sort of the smart TV aspects of my Roku TV, it looked like I had to pay for the whole season. There was a cost to watching it. So I don't know if there's a difference if you watch it with the app on your Fire device compared with the Fire TV. That doesn't really seem to make sense, so I think I may be missing something. PBS is, I think, making this series available widely, so there's probably lots of ways to watch it. This comes right out of my period. I was finishing up in college in 1972 and had a draft number 333. So watching this series and all of the different perspectives that it's bringing to it, interviewing soldiers from North Vietnam and the Viet Cong and from the South, and then shifting over to the protesters here in the United States. And there's something, I think, there's a credibility or something about the way it's being presented. I hope, and I think from things I've read, it doesn't seem to be a polarizing view of the war, which is quite a trick because it's one of the most polarizing events in our history. So to treat it in a way that appears to give everyone voice, maybe it's got some of the aspects that Jillian's talking about in conversations. That in conversations are when you find your beliefs being affected by the reality of other people's existence, and when you see all of the pieces of this Vietnam crisis and all that flowed from it laid out so dispassionately. There's plenty of passion in the representation of it, but boy, I just think it's an excellent an important piece of journalism and documentary art by one of the masters of it, Ken Burns. That's it for this week. I don't have a guest booked yet for next week's show. Partly, I think there's still a chance that Amazon might be introducing an updated Kindle or two, in which case I might be traveling to some kind of a product demo for the media. I really haven't got any indications of that yet. It's just a hunch. I had another idea that since we're here in Maine and Stephen King has a new book coming out, Sleeping Beauties, coming out next week, co-authored with his son Owen King, and he lives up in Bangor, which is not, I don't know, it's got to be less than an hour's drive here in Ocean Park. So I reached out to him by a couple of paths. There was an editor of his at a mystery book that I corresponded with 2 years ago. I sent him an email. He said he wasn't in touch with him still, and he told me his agent's name. So anyway, I've put a couple of lines out into the pond, and if I get lucky, maybe I'll have a chance to talk to Stephen King. That will result in my having a crash course on reading his books. I have read some of his books, and I admire his writing, but I'm not someone who would be able to enter a conversation with him drawing on a passionate connection with all of his books for many decades, but still it would be a good conversation to have. It's especially interesting perhaps to talk to him and his son, a father-son team writing a book together. That's got some aspects to it that would be fun to explore. It's been a while since I have been approaching midnight as I put the show together. It's 11 o'clock now. I've still got a ways to go. I blame the Apple Watch for this. The Series 3 arrived today at the cottage. Ordered one for me and one for Darlene. And I thought, I'll wait to open them after I put the podcast together. That didn't happen. So I did lose a fair amount of time this afternoon getting them all set up, and it was pretty fun. I'll have to say that. I was really curious to see what this cellular service on the watch itself was going to be like and how difficult it was going to be to set it up. It wasn't easy. I'm not going to pretend that it was a totally easy process, but with some help from Apple support and following the process through the pairing of the device on my iPhone, the Watch app, I was able to add on my AT&T wireless account. It's apparently going to cost me $10 a month to be able to make phone calls from the watch. It took a while for my contacts to load down to the watch, but at the Watson come here moment was I was up here in the second floor bedroom of the cottage, and Darlene was down in the rec room working on her quilts. So I tapped in her phone number on the watch, and I had turned off my iPhone because the whole point of this is that you can use the watch for texting and phone and all the stuff that you can do with cellular without having it be tethered to the watch. So I turned my iPhone off, and I tapped the phone number for Darlene into the Apple Watch, and what do you know, there she was. She answered, and I could hear her, and she said she could hear me, and the quality was really good. Now, I don't know if it was just because with the Series 2 watch, I always would hold it up close to my mouth and my ear. It was sort of an awkward action to use it as a phone because I thought I had to be so close to it. The volume coming from the Apple Watch was such that I didn't need to have that sort of awkward holding it up close to my mouth and my ear. I could hear it with my hand extended down in a normal position, and she could apparently hear me when I was talking at arm's length. This was like the demo when the Apple executive was out on a paddleboard talking on the Apple Watch to someone at Steve Jobs Theater. So the audio quality and the microphone seem to be pretty robust on this, and it makes me think that it might very well be that when I'm out biking or in different situations, I might be leaving the phone at home and just relying on the watch. I read a fascinating piece that listener Mark Roberts sent a link to me last night, and it was a review by someone who had worn the watch for a week and apparently used it a lot without the phone nearby. And he was making the case that this is actually a way to back off from staring at a screen all the time. That if you're out with the watch and you can get phone calls and you can see text messages, and you can use the Maps app and find your way to someplace you're trying to get to, but you're not going to be trying to read the New York Times and the Washington Post on the watch. You can get little digest items, but it's not likely. So that maybe I'll be traveling light if parts of a day or parts of a week I say I'm going to leave the iPhone at home and I'm just going to walk on the wild side and have this thing on my wrist be my only connection to the internet and my only communication device. That pleases me because I have enough self-awareness to know that I just spend too much time looking at that iPhone, and especially when the news is getting kind of intense and whether it's hurricanes or whatever it is, I dream of backing off from this living so closely tethered to the internet. And strange as it might seem, this new early adoption of the Apple Watch Series 3 could lead in that direction. Anyway, I'm going to give it a try. It's going to be fun to experiment and see if I develop new habits of digital connection, because this watch has creating a whole new set of possibilities by having a cellular connection built into the watch itself. I'm also pleased that it feels absolutely the same size as the Series 2. It's not I think it might be slightly thicker, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. And it's a pretty nice piece of work. If you ordered a Series 3 like I did on the first day, you've probably got yours by now. I'd love to hear your impressions. Do you think it's going to change your digital life? We've got some intriguing technology to wrap our minds around here with this particular device. Not made by Amazon, but I know there's some overlap of those of you who are following Amazon devices like you do, but like I do, but also pretty connected to Apple as well. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from Ocean Park, Maine. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.